Welcome to the book release reading for two award-winning poets, Scot Siegel, winner of the MoonPath Press Sally Albiso Award for Tender Currencies, and Laura Jan Shore, winner of the Concrete Wolf Lewis Award for The Generosity of Birds. I want to show you these two beautiful books, and they are truly beautiful outside and inside. I mean, just take a look at these covers. Both of our winning poets today have in common their mastery of writing place and nature with vivid sensory detail, writing about the joys and tribulations of family, writing of grief and love and hope. And I think you'll find the connections between these writers as you hear their poems. And really, what I felt when I had the opportunity to read these manuscripts was a complete embracing of life in the poetry of these authors. So I'm Lana Hechtman Ayers, and I'm the managing editor for MoonPath Press and Concrete Wolf Press. And I want to thank you for showing up for poetry at the beginning of a new year fraught with anxiety for so many. Poetry gives voice to our common fears and desires and connects us to our shared humanity. Writing, listening, and reading poetry inspires us toward compassion for one another and for ourselves. Our first reader is Scot Siegel. Scot is a city planner living in the northern Willamette Valley, an educator, and an author of 3 chapbooks and 4 full-length collections, including Tender Currencies. Previous volumes include The Constellation of Extinct Stars and Other Poems, and Thousands Flee California Wildflowers, both from Salmon Poetry. Siegel works with Writing the Land, which pairs poets and land trusts nationwide. He has received the Oregon Poetry Association Poets' Choice Award, and the late U.S. Poet Laureate Philip Levine recognized Siegel's long poem, Pages Torn from a Schoolmarm's Diary, as a finalist with honorable mention in the Nimrod International 2012 Pablo Neruda Poetry Prize competition. Judge and MoonPath Press author Risa Denenberg said of this winning collection, written with the discernment of Cohen's, Tender Currencies, a narrative of climate, location, geologic, and human transformations, struck me with its lush language, steady rhythms, and exquisite descriptions. Scot, please unmute and read for us.
Thank you, Lana, and welcome everyone. It's so nice to see your faces and to know that you're in our midst. And I wanted to thank MoonPath Press, and particularly Lana and um, John Albiso for sponsoring and sustaining the award that I'm so honored and delighted to have received. And these readings and these occasions with presses, small presses particularly, are so special and mean so much to all of us who are writing. And Lana, I just want to acknowledge your work in building and sustaining this community. Having attended some of the prior readings, I know that you just really foster sort of very welcome and open culture, and I think that's so important, sustaining the work of poets and also, of course, sustaining the work of small presses such as MoonPath. And so thank you. And I'm going to read from Tender Currencies, and I have, I think, 12 poems, and they will fit within the 20 minutes that you've asked me to continue my reading. So this collection, just by way of background, sometimes it's helpful just for grounding to kind of understand, where the poet's coming from without over explaining. I'm not going to say much about the poems as I'm reading, but I will give you some background. The collection is in 3 parts, There are 50 poems altogether. There's a prologue poem and an epilogue or a coda piece at the end. And each section sort of has its own arc, but then the book itself, the collection, has an arc or a number of threads that sort of move through it. And one of the things that I heard earlier in your comments was just that embracing life or expressing life. And sort of one of the touchstones in my life and in my writing is this notion of, revising, constantly sort of examining and revising your life. And that's a notion that William Stafford um, conveys. And, you must revise your life. I think Rilke in his letters to a young poet said, you must change your life. And, it's this sort of constant reinvention. And as we go through changes in the world and upheavals in society and the world that we live in. I think poetry is one way to sort of ground ourselves and to give us the fortitude and the community to move forward and to move it, to continue to evolve as humans and as a society. So that's a little bit about sort of how I approach the work. Um, and there is a sort of an epigraph or a quote at the beginning of the collection that is a Stafford quote, and it's from his poem titled Vocation. And it simply says, your job is to find what the world is trying to be. So that's something else I live by. This is High Country, and it is the title poem of the first section of the book. So, High Country. I need to find a different line of work, one that measures progress in footfall, elevation gain and descent through transects of biome and microclimate, hurried season of bees and hummingbirds holding summer's frame still at eye level, wildflower sex at the speed of glacial till, and glaciers clinging still to the craggy roof of the world. I could make a career of camp setup and takedown, scouting food cache and unmapped spring, tracking huckleberries and morels, cool currants gathered in a loose shirt, casting with Angus's brown topless girl who divines bull trout from an emerald pool with a cane pole and red berry. I must begin and end each day like this, beside a ring of river stone, feasting on a small steely fire of my own making. Thank you. This is a paved path, and it has an epigraph by Eva Salitis. If I speak for the earth, I must sing. This nature park, nearly as large as the hole in the heart of the forest that was originally here, holds black-tailed deer, coyotes, and maybe a cougar. Twisted molebone and fur scat litter the verge, and splotches of hawthorn berries mark my walk. Lazuli buntings flounce upon the willows and graze on cinnabar caterpillars ravaging the tansy ragwort. Blue-faced, copper-chested, weighing less than this pencil, buntings sing a sweet swishing melodic squeegee song, pine top to pine top. They know more about fickle jet streams and ocean warming than hundreds of weather apps. In the after-work human crush for fresh air, I must get my steps in and take good care of this heart that limps along like an old black lab. Not complaining, I live in this world and therefore have a high pain threshold. There is too much at stake. We think we are not always free to love, yet buntings await. At this moment, some blaze through the oaks unbeknownst to those on electric bicycles. I do my part, keep my head on a swivel, and try not to look down at my phone so much. And there are a number of poems in this collection. Thank you. There are a number of collections in this poem that are after a place that's very close to my heart and is actually just down the street from where my partner Kristen and I live. and it's called Graham Oaks Nature Park. And it's one of a collection of natural areas that the regional um, agency or organization in the Portland area.
Scott, you're suddenly muted. Can you unmute yourself?
I don't know how that happened. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I don't
Okay.
know.
All right. So this poem is called Transpiration, and it's after Graham Oaks Nature Park in Wilsonville, Oregon. And just in terms of form and the structure of these poems on the page, there are a whole series of sonnets that are in couplets. So they're a couplet form of sonnet, and this is Transpiration. Even on a fierce day like this, hottest year on record, the preserve a parched clattering of stunted oaks, brittle fescue, and burnt June grass. A breeze foretells earth's tilt, delighting the cabbage white butterfly, an invasive whose rice paper wings arch inside an umbel of Queen Anne's lace, also invasive. Now a loose strand of wind teases thousands of tiny florets that shiver like stars or snow, and the sentinel oaks know there are no happy or sad endings to this story that moves water from one delicate body to another. Thank you. And three more poems I'll read from this first section of the book, and they're all sort of in this vein of eco-poetics. So, eco-poetics are really, not about, or they're of nature, but they're not merely nature poems. They're really reflecting on how we exist and how humans relate to nature and how nature actually shapes who we are as a species. Um, so the next poem is titled "A Pair of Greens," and this poem will appear in an upcoming anthology um, that's being published by Raven Chronicles Press, I believe, and it's a collection of uh, bird poems that are after birds of Washington State. A Pair of Greens. Uh, Vampirish in dark capes, they stalk damselflies at wetland's edge and hunt from clumps of sedge or stumps for higher ground on account of their stout build and hunched posture on twig legs. Not egrets or bitterns, more sarcastic, not regal like their blue cousins, though juveniles don a splash of sun, splotches on subdued plumage. Better light reveals rainforest green backs, chanterelle brown necks and chests, and slate gray wings, which on takeoff unfold akimbo. Mid-flight, their necks might appear unwieldy, though on the ground green herons stalk smooth as a pop star's moonwalk. We approach, and they let us get close, staying focused on the next meal. On each side of a claw-like beak, a little sunstone eye. In that fierce glare at the dragonfly, you might recognize a hint of pterodactyl. This piece is after Ramona Falls in the Cascade Mountains on the lower slopes of Mount Hood. Ramona Falls. I cannot look at those jade-laced falls in the Cascade Mountains without falling in love. Here, Ramona spits icy sheets at our faces. We make a nice bed on her moss. The froth of her breath is a long kiss. We cannot resist such pleasure. Ridiculous, I know, personifying wilderness, a waterfall. But what is love if not a free fall forestalled high above the rapids? And the last poem that I'll read from this first section of the book is a little bit different in tone and argument. It's called The Blue Whale and Her Diamonds. And the epigraph is actually a quote from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory that says, and it's about Voyager. You might remember that uh, spaceship or space vehicle that went out into space, went out, and we never saw it again, called Voyager. Voyager's message is carried by a phonograph record, a 12-inch gold-plated copper disc containing sounds and images selected to portray the diversity of life and culture on Earth. So there's a gold disc out there, millions of miles away, with a small record of humans. Voyager reaches deep into space, the deepest ever. The junior news anchor reports, but I think he means yet, because isn't the universe expanding? All matter projecting from one vertex on a radial course for discovery, if not destiny. Voyager drifts deeper toward infinity, traversing interstellar space, yet is unable to procreate. What makes this vessel more significant than the rest? The zebra mussel hitches a ride from Korea to Seattle in the bilge of a ship, a real pioneer. In a corner of the wharf, a tsunami ripped loose, crosses the Pacific with an aquarium of radioactive fish in its cavity. Space station, right here on Earth. There is a strange grace in the blinding of Voyager. Infrared spectrometer and radiometer shut down for now. I don't like space junk, obscuring the night sky, ghost nets strangling puffins, or islands of plastic clogging the intestines of the largest animals on Earth. It is difficult to sort out. I'd like to believe stars twinkle not from a child's wish or a mother's prayer or the air itself obscured by pollution, but the unending stream of unknown particles coming between us and them, micro shards of galactic mass, bits of iron, stone, and glass, and traces of oxygen and ice. I love how they disrupt the light and make the dark sky dance. Thank you. Uh, so the next section of the book is titled Closing Doors Softly. And there are a number of different uh, sort of perspectives, and the speaker is and some of it is autobiographical, and some of it is uh, sort of, I guess, fictional. But Closing Doors Softly. And the first poem is Enough is Enough. Stop with the billionaire space probes and turn down the ocean. We come into this world the same as we leave, squinting and suckling. Don't talk to me about lunar governance or the preponderance of evidence that water can be extracted from asteroids or the moon. If you ask where I am going, heaven or hell, I choose Venus. I'd like to believe there's a special place on her marble lap, a special place for you and me to rest our heads, for you and I to rest our heads. I flubbed the last part of that poem, but you get the idea. Thanks. This is Blue Water, and it's after my grandmother and Fritzy Siegel. At 13, I get up at 5 and walk through the city to a causeway above Biscayne Bay and sight fish for sheep's head. I never told you, didn't want you to worry, but I met this guy who kept all his belongings, tangle of rods, tackle, sleeping bag, and tarp, in a shopping cart. He talked to everyone and no one about the war, the Sea of Cortez, a favorite of expats and vagabond lovers, he'd say, where you could pick up spiny lobsters in crystal clear water and barbecue them on the beach. I could barely see over the rail, so he helped maneuver my bait through the waves toward the piling where the biggest sheep's head fed on barnacles. Once I caught a neon green parrotfish the size of a football. He kept yelling, "Break it off, son, break it off." But I froze in the tropical rain. A shadow under the bridge grew as an 8-foot nurse shark curled into view and took the parrotfish, snapping my line. I remember how much you loved to swim in the ocean, frilly blue bathing dress pulsing like a jellyfish in the surf. Do you remember the school of bluefish, fierce and yellow eyed, that came in close to feed on mullet? Thousands of finger sized oily fish swerved around my belly, bumping into your knees. Safety in numbers, you'd say, and thick was that school, the ocean turning smoky blue and flecked with silver in the frenzy. Sometimes the wind would kick up and blobs of tar stuck to our feet. You said they were from leaky tankers. I did not understand. I thought oil came from dinosaurs or faults in the ocean floor. The blue bottle jellyfish scared me more. Man o' war whose sting can paralyze, you warned. The ocean drew us in with its thorny charms, sharks and vets, poisonous tentacles, and curious fish with beaks. Thank you. This is four tenses, and it's very short, and there are four couplets. Four tenses, four couplets. There's no present like the present. It is the gift that keeps on giving. The future offers everything, promises nothing, and delivers something else. Past cannot remember what the future tried explaining to the present. Truth sometimes occurs when past, present, and future all sing in the same key. Thank you. Let's see. So this is the title poem of this third section that I'm reading from, and it's a haiboon poem. So that's a form where it's sort of a narrative poem with a haiku at the end of it, and this is called "Closing Doors Softly." I'm searching for scissors in the junk drawer when I find a note from an old friend who has passed that says, "Had we never met, I would miss you more." And this jogs a memory, unlocking a door to something else I once read. In addition to extinct stars whose wobbly light continues, there are others much nearer, but so new we do not see them. On the next moonless night, let's set up the chairs in the yard and stare at a swatch of sky until our eyes glass over. I want to catch a star winking anew with you. Some friends we'll never see again. So many more we have yet to meet. In springtime, everyone secretly loves you. Thanks. Thank you. The last four poems I will read are from the last section of the book, which is titled Bringing You Home. And just a little bit of background on this. I have my dad's family is from Michigan, and they used to spend a lot of time in northern Michigan, the upper portion of the lower peninsula. And I had never spent any time there. And I think the last time I was out there until this summer was for my grandmother's funeral. And I enjoy fishing. I enjoy all things outdoors. And I think that's something that my dad, growing up enjoyed. And I know he did because his father um, operated, he had a hunting lodge and it was just part of his upbringing, and I didn't really experience that apart from fishing, which I did a lot of fishing as a kid, and I still do that today. But I had an opportunity to go back to Michigan with Kristen, my partner Kristen, whose family is all from there, and they have a cabin in in that part of the state, and it's not too far from where my family spent a lot of time. So I got to explore that for the first time last summer when we went out there and visited with her family, which has really meant a lot to me. And I'd written about it, although I'd never been there. And so this poem was actually something that I wrote earlier, um, and it's sort of that place. And it's called Bringing You Home. And it has an epigraph by Jim Harrison, appropriately, the poet of Michigan, Northern Michigan, the late Jim Harrison. And the epigraph is, I've decided that when I die, I get to see all my beloved dead people and also my bird dogs that died if I don't fuck up. So that's Jim Harrison. Bringing You Home. When I die, I'm going straight to Michigan to see my dad's hunting dogs. His father's too. Maybe we'll all hunt together, 12 gauges slung over our similarly cockeyed shoulders as Grandpa beats a path through ash and sumac beside the Osable's black-green glare. Maybe in that burnt tire of a backcountry where our parents still know each other and some have reconciled, dogs run from house to house, lapping up food scraps and licking our faces. Maybe they know how it is with us, that we had to hide our love for 7 lifetimes, and now we can't help but make the furniture creak when we sleep. And they grin when we rise from the breakfast table, satiated and still starry from the night, then glint and scurry with mugs of coffee sloshing out to the back 40,000 acres of state lands where the dim and declawed revenant moon skips over the tips of jack pines, trying to keep up with the long train of pointers and retrievers in our wake. Thank you. The next poem is the title poem of the book, um, and it's Tender Currencies, and it has sort of an epigraph or a leading couplet that is uh, someone who's addressing the poet or addressing the speaker, and it says, Tender Currencies, um, what have you done on the scale of life, and have I mattered? Some compose symphonies, others paint or sing in the shower. We piece together words. You swivel your hips over a meadow, and your skirt brushes my wrist. I write that down. You place your hand on my chest and press slightly. My hand instinctually moves to your waist. I note that too. When our free hands meet at the curve of your back, I drop my pen and rest there. Sometimes we slope into each other like one animal dozing. I've lost track of how many times we've succumbed. Now a gang of cedar waxwings run off with my notes and scatter my ashes over Lake Tahoe. If I go first, I will be sad in a blue but content way. If you were to love another this strongly and gently after I'm gone, I would be happy for you, but bluer than the depths of this alpine lake. Every day, you matter immensely, so much so that you are sitting across from me now in the same room, writing this down too, but with a slightly different lilt in your pen that says, I love you in fewer words, so deeply this map unfolds forever. Thank you. Um, the last two poems, this is Roadside Stew. And this literally occurred to me when I was just sitting in traffic between Oregon City and West Lynn, and it wasn't moving. And things happen to you. Things happen when you're in those situations. And if you're a writer, you notice them. So this is Roadside Stew. I do not try to solve the algebraic equation that is the red-tailed hawk flashing across the rain-smeared windshield, then dropping to wheel level and pinning its prey to the ground, folding in on itself, growing small and still in the rear view like a prayer. It is too much to bear, much less solve. Too many variables and those large indivisible numbers to carry. I left my place an hour ago and stopped for a pound of lamb, $15 at the bourgeois grocery in the town where I used to live before the divorce, before I knew my own worth and the true value of time. Time for a walk in the woods after work with you, as Mount Talbot gives way to the rain and dark, and we stumble over cedars' contorted roots, letting the stew simmer. Or weekend time in December, nothing to do but dip and roll beeswax candles for the solstice, a Sabbath, or a blackout, or for no reason at all. Thank you. So this last poem is called For a Moment. And, there are a lot of things that it sort of references that are in the book and other poems, but I just wanted to add that there are several poems in the book that are of or after the pandemic, and I didn't read those tonight. I just didn't feel like reading those. We all know what that was about, but so there's some of that in here. For a moment, no curve, no smoke, no drought, no death count, no invisible threat, no need for a mask, no recoil from a hand that only wants your touch, your tenderness, your breaking bread, your heaven sent, your wishes and gifts, your latent caress, your shh. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing Laura read now. I'll turn it back to Lana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that gorgeous reading of your work. I mean, there's so many stunning lines in all of your work. The dim and declawed revenant moon. I mean, wow. No one can ever tell you a poet shouldn't write about the moon because that's just amazing. Nothing cliche there. And one of my favorite phrases in the whole book you read was heart that limps along like an old black lab. Man, that just gets me every time I read that poem, and so great hearing you. Thank you so much. We're going to have Laura read next, and let me tell you a little bit about Laura. Born in the UK, raised in the US, and now living in Australia, Laura Jan Shore's poetry collections include Breathworks from Dangerously Poetic Press, Water Over Stone, winner of Interactive Press Best Poetry Picks, and Afterglow, also from Interactive Press. She's also the author of a YA novel called The Sacred Moon. And that book was nominated for the Washington Irving Children's Book Award. Her work has been published in anthologies and literary journals on 4 continents, including Magma, Southward, and the Best Australian Poems. She received her MFA in poetry from Pacific University. As a judge for the Lewis Award myself, I summed up Laura's award-winning book in this way. The poems of the generosity of birds are vivid, honest, vulnerable, brazen, and fully experienced. Please read for us now, Laura. Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, oh, got it. Okay. Yeah, hold on a second and I'll be ready. Yeah. Okay, so this collection I dedicated with deep gratitude for the generations that walked behind me and those that walk beyond me. And this collection is very much about that continuum. I'm quite aware of that right now. The first section of the book is interrogating my relationship with my mother and who she was, trying to understand her. And my mother had one four-letter word that she would never, perhaps could never say. And that word was love. So I'm going to begin with a poem that is addressing love itself, to love. 1. Not once did my mother say your name, though we kids begged her to tell us. What do you think? She'd ask. Fingernails tick, tick, ticking on the breakfast table. For her, you might as well have been a curse. Does it fall from skies above? I trilled in the high school musical, yearning to be dunked in the living waters of you. Now your 4 letters have become common as a copper penny, spent often, worn by many hands. No, not a penny. You're more like a silk parachute. Unpacked, you float me safely back to dirt. But when you fail, I'm hung, dangling in a tree. The surprise of you, that first winter night with Anand, the lush timbre of his voice as he invoked your name, and everything became possible. Ubiquitous as air, you're a verb I declare again and again with my children. Though we warned him, Anand persisted until he melted our mother's allergy to hugs. I cradled her urn as we drove to the cemetery, womb that forged me. How could she not have noticed? You were always there, breathed in with ordinary intimacies, a granddaughter's gaze, a just right pair. You circulate through us, spiritus as mist, always there, to be claimed, named or unnamed. So after doing many poems about my mother, I began to think, well, what if things had been a little different? This poem's called Reconstructing Mama, and it's actually a ekphrastic poem that began from a pastel portrait that I have of her. Reconstructing Mama. It's the 13-year-old version of you in this pastel portrait, dated 1938. Your braid tied in a big blue bow, just months before it was lopped off in favor of a perm. Your eyes were already a wary gray, with the whiff of defiance you showed years later by marrying a Jew. In your sailor's blouse you sat, stiff-backed, bored with this stillness, the artist working swiftly to capture your mouth's resignation. Like a skittish fox freed from the trap of boarding school, your gifts lost in the welter of dyslexia. You dreaded the holiday's end. Your picture hung in the hall with the others, the third of 4 siblings in sailor tops, a clever tribe specialized in terrorizing the nannies until they quit, leaving your mother in tears. As I soften my stare, I wonder, were you already determined to become the mother you never had? Not a pillowy mama to snuggle up against. No, you were mom. So cool with your Kent cigarettes and diet pills. You encouraged cartwheels in the living room, free-range dinners snatched from the fridge. None of us, not my father who adored you, nor any of your 4 children, could snap you out of the melancholy that ripples in soft strokes from this picture. Your face faded and spotted now. But what if it had been otherwise? What if you'd been born, as my granddaughter was, into a hot tub? A wise Hawaiian midwife presiding, your father cradling your mother, both raising you to the surface to marvel at your perfection. I try not to explode in mirth at the very idea of Granddad holding Granny in labor, because that could only have happened if she too had been a welcomed girl child, and somewhere in Ireland, her mother's birth had been rejoiced over. In fact, we might need to sponge out the whole history of patriarchy. Instead, I conjure a rebirth for myself, in which you, my resolute mama, rise up from the table, free your feet from the stirrups, push away the doctor with his forceps and manipulations, trusting your instinct to kneel on the floor, and I follow my urge to slip out in a gush, feet first, so that the first gaze you greet me with, and I mirror back to you, it's not one of disappointment, but triumph. So, just checking here. I lost track of something. Wait a minute. Here we go. So, my granddaughter, who I'm talking about in that poem, whoops, can I hold this so you can see it? There. No, still can't see it. Oops, there we go. Who was born into a hot tub on my veranda with a Hawaiian midwife, painted the picture that's the cover of my book. And this poem is written to her when she was 21. She's now 24. A continuance for my granddaughter at 21. I am not a separate woman. I am a continuance. That's from Joy Harjo. Once your ambition was to be a mermaid. Now you dive and surface with ease. Wet tendrils of hair accentuate the planes of your cheekbones, mirroring my own. The tide wraps around us and tugs at our limbs, like my mother straightening my skirt with an appraising frown. How many ways I've celebrated your declaration at age 5, holding your artwork for all to see. I'm so proud of myself. I want to believe you will never hesitate to shine, that you'll be the one to escape the river of mothers branded by self-doubt. You were the 7-year-old who shinnied up mulberry trees to collect leaves to feed your pet silkworms. Still only 7 when you learned of your father's infidelity. You stood by the creek, hands on your hips, and confronted me. Didn't you teach him not to lie? Didn't you teach him not to cheat? Over my kitchen table, your self-portrait hangs on a palette of browns. Your blazing eyes, a wisp of a girl, white flowers etched into your skin, recumbent on a gash of raw, red earth. At 21, like you are now, I was already a mother, a wife, stunned by the guilt frame around my life. Makes me hope we can heal backwards. My mom singing instead of sighing. My granny in pink leotard learning ballet. When I whispered into your unborn ears and we painted your mother's belly with dolphins, my prayer for you was to always feel heard and held in a circle of women. We tied red yarn from wrist to connect us with the cord soon to be cut. Our voices like stirred coals flaring up. Now, standing at my stove, you are stirring spring onions in a hot pan. We eat what we've made together, silenced only by the sound of the surf. So now we'll go to the second half of the book, and I'll take you to the rainforest in New South Wales. Waking in the tropics after dreaming of snow. Through the window, she-oak needles shiver under the shimmying weight of a wagtail. My eyelids are at half-mast, languor after a broken night's slumber. Fruit bats in the papaya. I feel chastised by the young magpie begging for grubs. My body melts into my chair, aware of the brush turkey in the banana tree, demolishing fruit. A caucus of crows dive and call from the tangle of mangroves. A python dangles. What lingers is the scent of snow. A North American forest, pine cones, blue jays, the dark velvet eyes of a doe. Wistful as the crested pigeons cooing on my deck, I'm missing my raucous laughs with you. Our nest under the quilts, the notes I could hit, your baritone lilt. How my tongue, like a fish, muscled its way along the shoals of your skin until, silent as a heron, you scoop me up and toss me deeper back into the gullet of my desires. I wrote a whole book about my late husband, and I thought I'd gotten that out of my system, but poems just keep coming up about him, and here's another. Wasabi and the Crow. My darling, loving you was like romancing air, nothing to butt up against except your charm. Orbiting each other, the magnetic attraction, the white space between. When I was pawing the ground, head bent, ready to charge, you were lithe as a matador. Your silken cape chastened me. How you always knew, even before I did. You read my silences like Braille. Stop yelling at me, said with a twinkle to my tight lips. Some days you played the bull and I would flee, pretending to be a wood nymph. Your winks and jokes tickled my nose. When I sneezed, you quivered through me from scalp to soles. Like the wasabi and the crow, how it shook itself, feathers ruffling, after taking a beakful of green paste from the trash. Eyeing us, it returned again and again, shuddering each time like the first. How I felt when you nibbled my earlobe. Alone on the beach, under an empty sky, it all comes clear. You promised me vastness and delivered, even before your irrevocable exit. Now that you are safely dead, I unlock my jaw, teach my voice to roar. I used to live in the rainforest without inside toilets for a while. I used to love getting up in the middle of the night. This is called joy. Out the screen door, into the musk of night jasmine, I slip on my gumboots, past the termite mounds, through lemon-scented eucalypts, to squat, wary of jumping jack ants on the old wooden seat, overlooking the moonlit mountain. A spiral of flying foxes squabble over palm berries. The air is charged with the swell of cicadas, a koala's guttural growl. My soles are pressed to packed earth, head bowed under a kite of stars. There's something elemental about damp toilet paper, the act of balance over the hole, slapping mosquitoes, picking a leech off an ankle, smearing the blood. So this is a poem that I'm writing addressing a lemon-scented gum tree, beautiful smell. It was always you I sought for comfort, an arc of green gathering birds. No ears, yet you knew the timpani of rain, no mouth, but your answer to the wind, a fringe of buds. I leant my back into your broad trunk, rarely remembering to seek permission. My toes trespassed amongst your roots, fountaining deep into the soil. Your sanction was the scent of citrus leaves. I've no vocabulary to match. At your outermost twigs, the weight of birds tolled like a bell, each cell tremoring all the way down until even the taproot chimed. Chasing elsewhere, I wore you in my spine and in the thick pads of my feet. Behind my shut eyes, you stood unshakable. But when I eventually returned, I found the gap in the canopy, your cracked stump and hewn chunks of trunk strewn, each a hidden garden, host to lichen and moss. I sprawled face down, hugging your girth with all my little griefs. What did I know of falling? You were one, and now you are many. My cheek furrowed into your flaking bark. I listened to small insects burrow and discovered to wither is another way to flower. I just have two more. This one's a septuagenarian reflex. Today, I toss my judgments out with coffee grinds and lemon rinds, contractions and reactions my body knows so well must go. I chop up the reasons why my happiness has yet to bloom and stir it into hot compost. Let it steep. Once I was a righteous woman, my piety a mountainous grandeur. I knew how to behave, to bow to reality and make do, ever tightening my sphincter. Today I let my belly swell, melting my rictus jaw, I let loose a roar. Get off my back, to no one in particular. A flick, karate kick, and strike. Today, I drop onto my knees and plant a yellow tea rose, a hybrid named Eternal Flame. I mulch to thwart the drought, layer leaf litter with leftover ambitions and banana peels. And finally, Eyes Open. Starts with a little quote from Claribel Alegria. I want to enter death with my eyes open. I want to enter death with a full stomach after a feast of pickled vegetables, a mix of sour, bitter, and sweet. I want to enter death resonant with the names of God, chanted by children, sound looping out and out, relentless as the song of the male magpie in spring. I want my last inhalation redolent with salt breeze, coffee, and apple peels browning in the sun. My left hand smoothing the worn vellum covers of Rilke. In my right, the comfortable heft of a fountain pen, drooling ink. I want a caravan of colorful tents tucked into a garden bower, where I lie, stretched out on silken pillows, my cheeks brushed tenderly by grandchildren with wands of pussy willows. I want to know in every desiccating cell of my being that I belonged. I want to enter death like a lover who has been cheated of nothing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura, for that wild, wonderful reading of your work. I mean, just so many great poems that you read. I love, in particular, the line about to wither is another way to flower. That's such a wise woman line. And our voices like stirred coals flaring up, and your voice just flaming up, just beautiful with fire tonight. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask now if there's anyone that wants to raise their virtual hand and make a comment or ask a question to either of our poets. And I look for a human hand, but it's hard to see among the people if there's any. But if you raise your virtual hand, and don't be shy. And if not, I have a question for both of our poets, and so while we're waiting to see if a hand comes up, um, I commented on the beauty of both of your covers earlier, and Laura, you talked about your granddaughter's painting. Um, I just love covers of books. You know, they're part of the reason we are attracted to books. The covers draw us in, and just question for each of you is your connection to the art on your book, and how you kind of felt like it represented the book itself for you. So I don't know if you wanna start, Laura, because you already talked about this being a wonderful painting of your granddaughter.
Well, it was a commission. I asked her to paint it, and I wanted lots of birds. I wanted it to represent the rainforest in the area that we live. And so yeah, she did exactly what I asked her to do. She asked me at every point, and I have the actual painting you can kind of see behind my back
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
wall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've never commissioned a painting before, and certainly not for my granddaughter, but it was a really special experience for us to work together on it.
Oh, that's wonderful. It is so absolutely stunning. And I think it's so vibrant and alive that it gives a flavor of your voice, of the poet's voice. I mean, the art and the poet's voice, they just belong together. Really beautiful cover.
Thank you.
What about you, Scott?
Yeah, thank you. And with your permission, Lana, I'll try to share an image of the cover. So it's a little difficult to make out just holding it up to the screen. I don't know if it's possible to share my screen.
I think I
Oops.
just gave you permission. It says I did.
Oh, okay. Then I'll try that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So, um, oh, can everyone see that? I hope. So I have always enjoyed um, working with artists and collaborating with artists and trying to find the right piece for my books. And I had found something that I really liked, and I thought it suited this collection well. Then when I made this trip out to Michigan, I just started playing around with my own art and photography and digital renderings and developed this cover myself. And so this is something that it's from photography, and it's sort of it's overlaying images from different places, including the high desert of Oregon and Lake Michigan itself. And so um, it's something that I developed and felt that it represented the collection and incorporates a number of the metaphors that are uh, sort of embedded in different poems. So that's where it came from, and I'm pleased
Yeah.
with it. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I love that you're able to create your own cover art as well, and that you are kind of the mingling of locales, because you have so many beautiful locations in your poems, and I think your cover speaks to the intricacy of the way that you are able to talk about the particulars of nature and our relationship to nature in your poems. And I just think it's a beautiful cover.
Thank
And
you.
it's hard for me to imagine another work on this book than the one that you came up with. It's
Oh,
just
well, I
so
really
apt.
appreciate, yeah, and I really appreciate your willingness to, take a risk and have an author develop their own cover art. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you both for such a great reading. And if there aren't any questions or comments, I would like, before we close, to ask each of our poets to read us just one more poem. And that would be a delight. Laura, would you like to read a poem?
I always like to read a poem. I thought I'd read the poem that Inheritance. It's the poem that has the title in it. Okay. Inheritance. 1. To escape her parents' squabble downstairs, she climbs out her bedroom window, feet dangling, heart tumbling. Her wrist glances against ivory petals as she leaps into the arms of the dogwood, knees hugging the spindly trunk. Her feet read each brittle branch like braille. She lowers herself to the final drop. Across the frosty lawn, a solace of purple in last year's leaves. On her knees, she uncovers the first crocuses, their yellow tongues an arc of joy. She sticks out her own tongue to taste the pollen. 2. Rewind all the way back to a plaid blanket on an English lawn, one dimpled toe in her mouth, their voices rising like crows behind her. The other foot kicks at the bunching clouds. Or forward to the scent of sage gathered in the Rocky Mountains, fiery Indian paintbrush flowers, bees humming half drunk in the autumn sun. She balks when mother says it's time to go home. Tears threaten, but her father's muscled arms hoist her high onto her shoulders, and her cheek nestles into his silky black hair. 3. No matter what menaces her dreams, morning by morning, the generosity of birds lifts her. She opens her eyes to receive her inheritance of sky. Then there's the waiting at the hospital with her mother, who now has dementia and has forgotten why they've come. She seeks refuge in a finger of light, scarlet leaves caught in an updraft. After her father's funeral, she finds herself, groceries on one hip, face to face with the doe and her fawn, ears twitching, their liquid eyes attentive, as she sings 2 wobbly choruses of Don't Think Twice. It's all right.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And Scott, please unmute and read a final poem for us.
All right, thank you. So I'll read the first poem in the collection, and it's the prologue. So it's really an invitation to read the book, and I hope I hope that you will. And it's titled Vista. You have traveled long enough, loved and failed, come home and left for other states. You must be tired, friend. No one else on the highway. Lift your foot from the gas and roll onto the shoulder. Turn off the engine and step outside. This is your homecoming and disappearing act. Turn your back to the mountains and look out. Solace and desolation tango on a desert playa. This could be a new way to see yourself in the world. Now, give yourself permission.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again to both our poets, to Scot Siegel and Laura Jan Shore. And thanks to all of you in the audience for being here. A poem is only ever complete when it has a listener or a reader. I hope you'll support our poets by getting copies of their books available through the poets themselves or your favorite bookshops, either brick and mortar or online. And I hope you'll tune in for future MoonPath Press and Concrete Wolf readings. Until the next time, may you find poetry everywhere you look and discover another facet of your own heart in every person you meet. Thank you. Bye for now.